History remembers World War II as a war of massive armies. Columns of tanks rolling across Europe, fighter planes tearing through the sky, millions of soldiers clashing on battlefields from France to Russia. But what most people never saw was the other war. A war fought in silence. A war where the most powerful weapons were not bombs or bullets, but information. Across Europe, secret networks of spies were quietly gathering intelligence. Hidden radio transmitters were sending coded messages through the night. Mathematicians were fighting a battle against encrypted machines. And in dimly lit rooms, intelligence officers were planning operations so secret that even their own governments barely knew about them. This was the invisible battlefield of World War II, the secret war. A war where a single message, a single spy, or a single deception could decide the fate of entire armies, and sometimes the fate of the entire world. September 1939. Europe stood on the edge of disaster. Nazi Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, launched a sudden and devastating invasion of Poland. German forces moved with terrifying speed, using a new form of warfare known as Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Within weeks, Poland collapsed. The world watched in shock. Britain and France declared war on Germany, but few people truly understood what kind of war this would become. For many military leaders, the coming conflict looked similar to the First World War, large armies fighting long, brutal battles across Europe. But inside intelligence offices in Berlin, London, Moscow, and Washington, a very different kind of war was already being planned. These governments understood something deeply important. Modern war depended on communication. Orders had to travel between commanders, troops had to coordinate their movements, navies had to communicate across oceans, air forces had to direct their bombers. And if the enemy could intercept those messages, they could predict every move. This realization turned intelligence into one of the most powerful weapons of the entire war. Before the first major battles even began, intelligence agencies were already preparing for a conflict that would be fought in the shadows. As German forces expanded across Europe, intelligence agencies on all sides began building vast espionage networks. Germany relied heavily on an intelligence organization called the Abwehr. The Abwehr was responsible for gathering information about enemy military forces. Its agents traveled across Europe posing as businessmen, diplomats, journalists, and travelers. Some spies worked deep inside foreign governments. Others observed military bases, ports, and factories. Their reports were sent back to Berlin through secret radio transmissions or hidden couriers. But Germany's enemies were building intelligence networks of their own. Britain's intelligence agencies, MI5 and MI6, were rapidly expanding their operations. MI6 focused on gathering intelligence abroad. MI5 focused on protecting Britain from enemy spies. Together, these agencies created a defensive shield around the country. By the early years of the war, dozens of German agents had already entered Britain. Their mission was simple: watch everything, report everything. Every military convoy, every new aircraft, every naval movement. German intelligence believed these spies would provide them with a clear picture of Britain's military strength. But something unexpected happened. British counterintelligence found them. One by one, German spies were captured. And this is where one of the most brilliant intelligence strategies of the war began. When British intelligence captured German spies, they faced an important decision. They could execute them, or they could use them. British intelligence chose the second option. Captured spies were offered a choice: work for Britain as a double agent or face execution. Many of them agreed. And with that decision, the double-cross system was born. Instead of eliminating German spies, Britain secretly turned them into agents working for the Allies. These double agents continued sending messages to Germany, But now, those messages were controlled by British intelligence. Every piece of information sent to Germany was carefully crafted. Some messages contained small amounts of truth to maintain credibility. Others contained deliberate lies designed to mislead German commanders. Germany believed their spies inside Britain were providing reliable intelligence, but in reality, every single report was being manipulated. This deception became incredibly powerful. German military leaders began making strategic decisions based on information that Britain had secretly written for them. In effect, Britain had gained the ability to influence the enemy's strategy from the inside. And that power would soon play a critical role in one of the most important operations of the entire war. As the intelligence war intensified, Germany believed it possessed one of the most secure communication systems ever created. It was called the Enigma Machine. At first glance, Enigma looked like a simple typewriter placed inside a wooden box. But inside that box was a complex system of rotating wheels and electrical circuits that transformed ordinary messages into unreadable codes. Every time a German officer typed a message, the machine scrambled the letters into a completely different pattern. To anyone intercepting the transmission, the message looked like a random string of letters, meaningless, impossible to understand. But what made Enigma truly terrifying was the number of possible combinations it could generate. Every day, the machine used a new configuration of internal settings. Those settings changed again the next day. Mathematicians later estimated that Enigma could produce over 150 quintillion possible combinations. To the German military, this meant one thing: their communications were safe. German commanders could send secret plans, naval orders, and military strategies across radio networks without fear that the enemy would ever understand them. Entire military operations depended on this machine. German submarines in the Atlantic relied on Enigma to coordinate their attacks on Allied shipping. Air Force units used it to plan bombing missions. Army commanders used it to move divisions across Europe. In many ways, Enigma had become the nervous system of the German war machine. And if someone could break that system, they could see inside the mind of the enemy. While German commanders trusted Enigma completely, a quiet and secret operation was taking shape in Britain. It was hidden inside an old estate known as Bletchley Park. From the outside, Bletchley Park looked like nothing more than a large countryside mansion surrounded by small huts. But inside those buildings, one of the most important intelligence operations in history was underway. Britain gathered some of the brightest minds in mathematics, engineering, and cryptography. Among them was a young mathematician named Alan Turing. Turing understood something crucial. Breaking Enigma by hand would take centuries, but machines might be able to do it faster. Working with a team of engineers, Turing designed a mechanical device capable of testing thousands of possible Enigma configurations every minute. These machines became known as bombs. Day and night, the machines ran endlessly, searching through millions of possible code settings. It was slow, frustrating. Sometimes weeks passed without progress. But eventually, patterns began to emerge. Little by little, the code began to crack. And when it finally did, the Allies gained something almost unimaginable. They could read German communications. The intelligence gathered from Enigma became known as ultra-intelligence. But the most dangerous part of this discovery was not decoding the messages. It was protecting the secret. If Germany ever discovered that Enigma had been broken, they would immediately change the system. So the Allies had to be extremely careful. Sometimes they knew an attack was coming, but they could not stop it. If they acted too quickly, Germany might realize their codes were compromised. So intelligence officers were forced to make terrible decisions. They had to choose which information to use and which to ignore. It was a hidden moral burden carried by the intelligence community throughout the war. One of the most deadly struggles of World War II was the Battle of the Atlantic. German submarines, known as U-boats, were attacking Allied shipping routes across the ocean. These ships carried food, weapons, and supplies from America to Britain. Without them, Britain could not survive. German U-boats hunted in coordinated groups called wolf packs. Using Enigma messages, submarine commanders received instructions about where Allied convoys were traveling. They would gather silently beneath the ocean and wait. When the convoy arrived, the attack began. Torpedoes struck ships in the darkness. Explosions lit up the night. Entire cargo vessels disappeared beneath the waves. Thousands of sailors died in the freezing water. For a time, it seemed Germany might succeed in cutting Britain off from the rest of the world. But the Enigma breakthrough slowly changed the balance. By reading German naval messages, Allied commanders could track submarine movements. Convoys were redirected away from wolf packs. Destroyers were sent to intercept submarines before they could attack. Gradually, the tide of the Atlantic battle began to turn. It was one of the clearest examples of how intelligence, not just weapons, could change the outcome of war. Espionage was not only about stealing secrets. Sometimes the most powerful intelligence operation was convincing the enemy of something that was not true. During World War II, Allied intelligence developed an entire science around deception. The goal was simple: make the enemy believe a lie, and they will act on it. One of the most brilliant examples of this strategy was Operation Mincemeat. In 1943, the Allies were planning to invade southern Europe. The real target was Sicily. But if Germany concentrated its defenses there, the invasion could fail. British intelligence needed a way to mislead the enemy. The plan they created sounded almost unbelievable. They took the body of a dead man and dressed him as a British officer. Fake military documents were placed in his pockets describing a supposed Allied invasion plan targeting Greece and Sardinia. The body was then released into the sea near the coast of Spain, where German intelligence agents were known to operate. When the body was discovered, Spanish authorities passed the documents to German intelligence. The Germans examined them carefully, and they believed them. German commanders moved thousands of troops to defend Greece. Meanwhile, the real Allied invasion landed in Sicily with far less resistance. Operation Mincemeat had worked perfectly. An entire military defense strategy had been redirected by a single, carefully planted deception. While intelligence agencies operated behind government walls, thousands of ordinary people also joined the secret war. Across occupied Europe, underground resistance networks formed. These groups worked secretly against Nazi occupation. In France, the French resistance created a network of spies, couriers, and saboteurs. They gathered intelligence about German troop movements and passed it to Allied command. They destroyed railway lines used to transport German weapons. They guided Allied soldiers and pilots through hidden escape routes. In Poland, underground fighters provided critical information about German weapons programs. Some resistance groups even built secret radio stations to communicate directly with London. But resistance work was incredibly dangerous. If captured, members were often tortured for information. Many were executed. Yet, despite the risks, resistance networks continued operating. Their courage provided intelligence that helped the Allies plan major military operations later in the war. By the final years of World War II, espionage had become a massive hidden battlefield. Thousands of spies were operating across Europe. Millions of encrypted messages were being transmitted every month. Codebreakers were decoding enemy communications day and night. Entire military campaigns depended on information gathered by intelligence agencies. Some victories were achieved before the battle even began, simply because one side knew what the other was planning. Many soldiers fighting on the front lines never realized that their survival often depended on intelligence gathered far away from the battlefield. They saw the war through explosions and gunfire. But behind the scenes, quiet decisions made by intelligence officers were shaping the course of history. World War II is remembered as the largest military conflict in human history. But the battles we see in photographs and documentaries tell only part of the story. Behind every invasion, every naval battle, every bombing campaign, there was another war. A war fought in secret. A war of spies, codes, deception, and intelligence. A war where mathematicians could defeat machines, and where a single message could change the fate of millions. Without this hidden war, many of the Allies' greatest victories might never have happened. The soldiers on the battlefield carried the burden of the fighting, but in the shadows, intelligence officers carried the burden of knowledge. And together, their efforts helped bring the war to an end.